So I'll take this as an opportunity to say something I didn't have a chance to say earlier as we were trying to figure out our own technology, but I think one of the things that's really come clear to me, and it will lead to kind of where the idea of this class came from, is it's so much easier to do the same thing day in and day out, and to see, in essence, the challenge from the same angle day in and day out, as our lives have gotten busier. But I think what's become clearer and clearer to me, having been in this field for so long, is that that doesn't lead to a set of sustainable practices on its own, or sustainable solutions, or systems, or new ideas. And that's where we really make sure that we take the time that we're doing today. So in true MIT fashion, what we continue to do is to really cultivate and manifest this culture of sustainability, as we've set today out, to really seek to imagine, incubate, and impact, and all with a sense of great humility. And I think that really comes through in days like today, where we have a chance to pause. You hear from these unbelievable people, but as you can hear, it takes a village. We've really had to create these partnerships and kind of take a leap in some cases to really have a willingness to ask this new set of questions and build these, I would say, really unique partnerships over time. So that's my segue into this too, because this became an opportunity to look at carbon neutrality and really pause and begin to say, what do we even mean by this? What is the meaning of carbon neutrality? What's the time frame? How can we grapple with this at MIT? And I'll slowly weave some of this together, and before I introduce Tim, but this became an opportunity to design and develop a course and to think about, this is a panel on incubation, and there's no better place to incubate some ideas is with some of our incredible faculty and students to say, wow, what do we mean by carbon neutrality? How do we get there? What aren't we thinking of? And how ought MIT frame this? So this course really emerged at the intersection of a few efforts. One, it was our internal team was grappling, and many of you were in the room, to make progress on the 32% goal. We were really trying to figure out how do we do this in an economically viable way? What are the technologies? Where can we take risk? And where do we, again, stay the same? It also grew out of an opportunity where Tim, who's become a good friend and colleague, who had written a letter to the faculty newsletter, which maybe some of you had sent to me, basically saying, Tim, you can paraphrase it. Basically, he had taught a whole course analyzing carbon neutral plans at other universities and really trying to say, well, how can MIT get to this place? A similar question, so he can tell you a little bit more. And so again, it was sent to me in many ways saying kind of, who is this guy? And I said, oh, I know this guy. So we started opening up some conversations, and we said, let's create a course together where my role is to bring our operational friends into this dialogue, and his role was to bring all of the rigor and the engineering piece. Now, it was designed as an interdisciplinary course because all things climate you can't just look at through technology. It's a policy issue, it's an economic issue, it's a cultural issue, it's a design issue, and of course, the engineering piece of it. So I think part of the irony is we co-listed it with my connection to urban studies and planning, and of course with Tim in mechanical engineering, and we only ended up with engineering students. So I think that therein lies, I think, one of our challenges as well, but incredible students, as you'll see in a moment. So with that said, what Tim and I have designed, oh boy, me and this clicker today are having some serious problems. There we go. So here's where we came together, is that it takes a village to figure this out. And Tim and I reached out, and we took a number of months to say, how do we want to frame this challenge? And we engaged specialists from across the Institute and beyond to figure out who is going to input into this. Where can we take, if Tim and I are providing the breadth of the framework, who can help with all of the deep dives? And so, as you can see here, what's so unusual and unique about this course is that this is the range of lecturers, which range from unbelievable faculty, David McGee, a climate paleontologist, Kiran Satai, an ethicist, Les Norford in building technology, Chris Knittel, who looks at carbon pricing in Sloan on economics, to our incredible staff, where we've got Seth, who I don't see here today, but we've got Ken and Seth, Siobhan, Emma, and this became a full teamwork. And also for folks you don't know, we also were able to bring in folks from the city of Cambridge, Boston. We brought somebody down from Hydro-Quebec. We brought folks in who are running the ISO New England grid. And Tim and I started to joke that every time somebody came in, we'd say, that's the answer. But that was the beauty of this course. So what you're going to hear today is a brief overview from Tim Gutowski, professor of mechanical engineering, and 4 of our incredible students that Tim will introduce momentarily. So take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Julie. So whatever Julie says, it's really her idea that we're here. She has that kind of personality that you want to spend some time with her, and so when she suggests something or she asks somebody to give a talk, they just say yes. And so I said yes, and we had, I think, 18 people here who said yes. And I personally am very grateful. I think this has been a learning experience for me as well as for the students. I did teach an environmental class, or I do teach another environmental class, but the emphasis is different than this class. This is exactly what it says to be in the name of the class, Solving for Carbon Neutrality at MIT. I see some other people around the room, like Steve Villeneuve up here in front, who we also interact with, and Carlos, who and Ken, who maybe their pictures aren't up here, but were very generous with their time, came to the classes, and we had opportunities to talk to them and share ideas. So I think that's been a very nice part of this. I think it's a cooperative effort. I don't want to candy coat it. This is a tough problem, so we take it seriously. I want to thank Environmental Solutions Initiative for some support in getting this class off the ground and bringing in some visitors and other meeting basic needs to get this course done. Let's see, so I press this and up comes another slide. And then I backed up.
I'm not very good at this today.
There we go. So it's the class has a couple of different numbers. It's listed in 2 different departments. It's made up of graduate and undergraduate students. You have a mixture up here for students who will talk to you in a minute as soon as I finish. They formed 4 teams, and they're going to look at future scenarios. Our goal, which is science-based, is to become fossil fuel free for MIT by 2080. They will, as the teams, will come up with 2 different scenarios. One is sort of safer one, and one is a reach one, which may engage some newer technologies. We had more guest speakers than we actually had students, and I think we all learned from them. These were people positioned in areas which we thought were potential solution topics for us, and it's been, like Julie said, inspiring for all of us. So I think I got, to back up again. Okay, so the students in the class are here, and they're sitting right next to me. You can see in I have a pointer here. Do I have to get up and point? Well, you can see them right here. I don't need a point there. Here's Julian, Ignacio, Colin, and Caleb, and I think they're going to go in that order. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them, and they'll share a little bit of their experience with you.
I got my own, thanks. Hey everyone, my name is Julian Barber. I'm a Course 2 graduate student, and I'd like to just start by thanking Tim and Julie. I don't know, I think I can probably speak for us all, but this personally for me was the best course I've taken at MIT by far. It really took a systems perspective, looking at the climate problem. We got to take a deep dive into all the different components that go into coming up with solutions to climate change. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this from the student's perspective. I am the co-chair of the Sustainability Subcommittee, or the Graduate Students Sustainability Subcommittee, and the first day I came or got elected as the co-chair, I set up a meeting with Julie because I wanted to start integrating what we did at the GSC with students with the greater institutional goals. And when I met with Julie, we instantly connected on the fact that the students in the institute need to start being aligned in their missions when it comes to tackling sustainability issues. And we started talking all about these different ideas, and she mentioned this course, and it sounded like an amazing thing to do and to be a part of. And especially here at MIT, students, it's such a sensitive environment, and our keynote spoke to this before a little bit, where everything that we do while we're here is so important to shaping us as we go through our education and then into our professional lives. And as we start transitioning into our careers, those little things that we do while we're at MIT make a big difference. So having sustainability woven into the fabric of what we do while we're here is, I think, incredibly important. And this is just one example of how we can do that, and through the GSC and through the Office of Sustainability and through events like this, and through the greater institutional goals, having sustainability and climate change woven into the fabric of what we do here on campus at the early stages of student development is, I think, incredibly important. And it goes to what our keynote was mentioning about shaping and changing that behavior of people in leadership roles as we progress through the future. So that kind of butterfly effect, I think, is really important. And I think this course plays a really key role in making that happen, because it can inspire that call to action, that students can start to learn about these topics and act on them in a very critical moment in their development, which is our learning here at MIT. So that's from a very broad perspective from the student's angle. My fellow panelists will talk a little bit more about what we're doing within the class itself. So I'll pass it off to Ignacio.
Hey guys, so if you could, yeah, here we go. So it's a little bit of not completely true that nobody is out of course 2. I'm kind of snuck in here as like, oh, that's not it. There we go. I snuck in as a course 14 economics, and maybe possibly going back into to double major. But my kind of take has been, how do we look at carbon sustainability from the perspective of incentivizing it through what matters the most, which are the dollar bills and that kind of stuff. And kind of looking at how we're calculating what we want to do and how maybe we can make it look a little bit more appealing to the institute in general as a means to just get the ball rolling. It's an action that needs to happen today. It's not an action that we can wait on and make the economics work by saying, oh, it's going to be cheaper if we put the money in the bank and make interest on it, and then eventually go ahead and at the end of when we're about to reach our goal, say, all right, we're putting it all down and we're going to get this all done today, 20 years from now. That's kind of, that makes the most economic sense, but not the most sustainability sense. And so in thinking about that problem and looking at overall what are carbon emissions over the lifespan of the university, it kind of got me thinking of how do we get people to think about incentivizing action today. And so along those lines, I started thinking using the school's discount rates to maybe apply them to carbon. And that's I think just something that I'm able and going to continue working to apply in the class. And just for a little bit more background, what we've been necessarily calculating right now is the cost per metric ton of carbon in terms, so whenever we apply a net present value to a project, seeing how much it's going to cost us to actually implement this over the course of the project, that's one metric that we use to compare whether or not we want to build a building in one way or build a building in another way. But now we're also trying to incorporate how much reduction in metric tons of carbon that we can see from building a building one way or building it another way. So the way that we've come to terms with that is just dividing the cost by the amount of emissions abated that one time. And that doesn't necessarily give a full picture. And that's kind of where my issue was, where we could say, oh, we can take out these emissions today or we can take them out tomorrow, it doesn't matter. But what does matter is the accumulation of those emissions from today until the next time. So in order to kind of account for that, I started thinking if we could use an infinite sum total abatement of carbon. And so from what we got there was just that you can say we have a discount rate of about 5%. If we were to act today on any decrease in carbon, we'd get 20 times that, or we'd reduce our cost by about 20 times. If we were to do this in 2050, the same action in 2050 only gets about 5 times the amount of value. So that's just from like a short calculation thing. And really, it incentivizes us to look at solutions today rather than waiting on tomorrow, because today is really what we're here for and what we're trying to solve the issues for in this class. And so with that, I pass it on to Colin for actual solutions, not costs.
So I wanted to take a step back and talk a little bit about how this class was structured and just sort of how it led us through a couple different approaches to reducing carbon emissions. The first task or assignment in the class was basically to compare MIT's carbon reduction plan to other universities around the country. A lot of universities have been committed to this climate action plan in the past few years and have made significant strides towards emissions reductions. And so just for today, I compared MIT to 2 other sort of comparably sized research universities and just wanted to compare a couple metrics so we can look through and see where MIT maybe isn't doing well or maybe where it is doing well. So if we could actually just compare the emissions between MIT, Harvard, and Stanford, taking into account the fact that Harvard and Stanford are a little bit larger than MIT, and Stanford is in a much more temperate climate, which definitely does impact both emissions and energy use. We can see that MIT does not do particularly well when compared to either Harvard or Stanford in terms of their total emissions, emissions per student, emissions per building area, or even emissions per student and building area normalized per degree days. Degree days we can imagine sort of as a metric of how extreme the climate is. It takes into account how much heating we have to do and how much cooling we have to do, and kind of just lumps it together in this analysis, but sort of as a first pass, it gives us a general idea. So in that sense, we do particularly poorly on emissions per student, and I think that primarily just has to do with our relatively small student body. So this is emissions, and I think that we're doing some things to combat. But I think one thing that is underlying this is, well, maybe our energy usage is higher than other schools. So if we compare energy consumption between MIT and these other comparable schools, Harvard and Stanford, we see our total energy consumption is pretty middle of the road. Energy consumption per student is the highest. But we do get some benefits back in the energy consumption per building area per degree day. And in general, I think we do a little bit better on the energy consumption level than we do on the emissions level. So what this sort of introduces is the idea, well, maybe there are some sort of intrinsic inefficiencies in how we use energy and things that we can tackle on that front, besides just trying to address the energy production method directly. Maybe there are some things in the buildings we can impact. Maybe there's behavior we can impact, in addition to trying to electrify our system and switch towards some sort of renewable energy source. So that's just one aspect that we've considered. I'm going to hand it over now to Caleb, and I think he's going to talk about a couple other things we thought about.
Thanks, Colin. Let me back up a little bit. So Colin just discussed some of the issues we've seen, and so one of the things we did in this class, there's two approaches to carbon neutrality. One is reducing demand or energy consumption, and the other is getting clean supply. And so we first started looking at ways to reduce demand. And one thing we found is that we came up with all these ideas. We're like, we're going to save 20% here, 30% here. And one of the most exciting things was that when we talked to people around MIT, MIT is already looking at those things. We're looking at all the low-hanging fruit and working on implementing it, which is great. And so for me and for some of my projects, I kind of focused on how do we get clean energy, though? We can reduce demand maybe 50%, but at the end of the day, we need to somehow get some carbon-free energy. And so one thing I initially thought of was, okay, if the grid's not going to do it, let's see if we can build our own microgrid. So maybe it'd look something like this, put some wind turbines offshore a little bit, maybe a parking lot size of Tesla battery packs. When I did the math, it looked something more like this. And so those are block island size power plants, each 30 megawatts. 10,000 Tesla power packs, which is, each one of those is 16 Tesla cars. Expensive and also not low emissions because of the life cycle emissions of overbuilding that much. And there's several reasons for this. One is there's not a diverse supply. We're just pulling from one location and just wind. The other issue is there's not diverse demand. We're just feeding MIT. And the third issue is the technology is just really not cheap enough yet. The first two issues are resolved by not isolating MIT and instead helping it integrate into a grid that's slowly getting cleaner. And the third issue can be tackled by MIT's innovation might. And so what we're suggesting is, we're rebuilding the campus utility plant. We're going to have new turbines in, but say around 2040, maybe when these turbines are nearing end of life, we make some major changes. So we think in the intermediate, we should try to electrify the campus, and the most expensive issue with this is going from steam to hot water, which would enable heat pumps and major demand reductions. We also recommend energy storage for two reasons. One, when we lose the campus utility plant, we lose a lot of the resiliency we currently have by depending on the grid. But if we implement 8 to 16 hours of energy storage, that gives us a good buffer in case there's an issue with the grid. But more importantly, it makes us a great customer for a renewable grid where we can store energy when energy is available, say in the middle of the day with solar or some other times with wind. And what that does is let us buy the lowest cost energy and also the lowest emission energy. And so that helps enable higher renewable penetration into the grid by having flexible demand. And so lastly, like I mentioned, I think MIT can use its innovation might to help lower the cost of some of these technologies. So by the time we get to 2040 and start doing these things, they're more cost effective. And one example situation we have for MIT is, say when the gas turbines get turned off in 2040, maybe we repurpose that space to be a test bed for some of our new energy storage technologies. So instead of just developing small-scale things in the lab, we can take some of the best ideas, plug them in, power the campus with them, and get real data and see how they work in the real world. This is a huge issue for those technologies because we get smaller grants to develop them, but it takes a lot to get to that next step, and demonstrating it on campus would be a great way to do that. So I'd just like to say thank you to all of these. A lot of you guys came and spoke to our class, and we all kind of do this for a living in our research, but I definitely did not. I thought I knew more about it than I did, and I'm glad I know more about it now. And thanks to Julie and Tim for organizing the class.
Thank you guys so much. I have a question for each of you is either which topic or speaker, just generally. Like I said, Tim and I fell for all of the speakers, so maybe you can be a little more specific, provided you with a new perspective, because you all came in interested in the topic. You had already stepped in with an interest in solving for climate change, if you will, but which speaker topic offered you something totally new to your thinking?
I'll go first with that one. I can't remember exactly who they were. Oh, yes, I can see their faces. Here we go. Kieran and Frank, Chris. Those two speakers, one was talking about ethical concerns of climate change, and one was talking about carbon pricing and different policies. And I remember sitting in class and I'm a mechanical engineer. My research is in fusion energy, and I could literally feel the part of my brain like shift gears. I was like, it was like a relaxation of one part and a stress of the other part, and it was like trying to figure out, well, it's like there's no numbers here. What's going on? But it was incredibly insightful, and it was, it's a part of that problem. And my personal view is I find great value in understanding all the pieces of the puzzle. And so this is one of the great things I've been really enjoying about this course is getting exposure to all those pieces and having an opportunity to work out that other part of my brain that I don't get to work out, and be exposed to those high quality and high level professors that are working in those different areas. So those would be mine.
I guess I could go next. Honestly, I'm looking at them and I can't pick. Some of them are here in the room, and it's just there's I'm not about to start like picking favorites out here, but I definitely think that everyone added something. Hello. Everyone added a piece to the puzzle, and that's what was most important. I think it really shows that carbon, our issues for climate change aren't a one-person solution. This 18 people came through and told us their side of the story, and that's not even all of the sides of the story. There's still more out there, and there are more solutions out there that we haven't even considered, haven't even begun to think about just yet. And that's kind of what awes me and gets me to continue pursuing this. And I don't know, it's honestly just been an awesome experience and learning so much in this class, and it really puts the hand in mind aspect of MIT to use on helping MIT itself get better. And I think that's just the greatest takeaway.
So I really found the most compelling talks were those from the facilities and managers of the central utility plant. I was not really familiar with the complexities of supplying power and heat and all of these things to an institution of our size while maintaining redundancy, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that was really, really awesome to get some great presentations on what the people here at MIT are trying. And that, as Caleb said, they really have tackled a lot of the low-hanging fruit in terms of efficiency improvements or utilizing waste heat to heat the buildings and things like that. Things I didn't even think about when considering a utility plant for an institution like this. So I really appreciated their presentations and the attention they focus on sort of making MIT the best it can be with what we have.
All right, and I just want to say thanks to Joe Higgins and Jessica Transick for some of the financial advice. So Jessica basically showed us, here's the price energy storage has to be to really be useful, and it's lower than it is now. And Joe helped us, what our goal is to reduce emissions, and there's really expensive ways to make MIT carbon neutral that don't have a huge effect on the world. And so things like PPAs and getting ready for these future technologies are much more effective. And this metric of, Ignacio, I agree with his method of analyzing future benefit of emissions reduction. But in any case, you look at the cost of a project and see how that compares to how you value the emissions reduction that lets you make systematic decisions.
Thanks. I think for me, this has been, there are already a lot of other things that we do that keep me awake at night, and this is now added to that challenge because this is so complex. And I mean, I couldn't have done this without Joe and team back there. We had many conversations. One thing we did do is we put a plug-in for steam to hot water, Ken, just so you know. Yeah, PDRs are coming up, so you can put a good But no, this notion of on-site versus off-site continues to be quite a challenge, and I think something that we can really move out of, and this notion of time and space continuum, and of course the economics that lie behind that. And the way we've been able to grapple that, I think we'll have, maybe that's a plug for, May 14th is when the students will be presenting their final, projects, and, folks are interested, let us know. You're going to put the May 14th, 2:30 to 4, and I can't remember the room because...
It's
Tim's
the
favorite room.
Marlar Lounge. Some of you may know it by that name. The other name is Building 37, second floor 252, Building 37, 252. It's a big room, so there'll be room you can all come.
I do remember where our classes held. We're just switching rooms. Yeah, so anyway, that's been really a struggle, and I think we'll have to continue to figure out if we continue to offer this course or how we continue to engage in this moving forward. Before I pass it back to Tim, I do want to say, Ignacio, just raise your hand. So the Red Sox found out we were doing this and reached out and said, how do we build this is in this context of scalability, and actually just hired Ignacio as a summer fellow to actually build a greenhouse gas inventory for Fenway Stadium and beyond. So stay tuned, because I think we'll have a chance to support Ignacio and his work moving forward.
Yeah.
Right?
I was going to turn this around, and I thought this might be an opportunity. We all live in MIT buildings. We all come to work in one way or another and spend time here. I've been here as a graduate student since 1977. I started as a faculty member in 1981. I've been here a long time. I don't believe there's been a day that I've been here that we haven't had a construction project. And I can tell you this much we know already from our review: it's not going away. We got so many things yet to do. But maybe you have some ideas you want to share with us, or questions. I think we could, but you might, I'll throw that out there. Let me see if anyone wants to bite. Yeah.
An opportunity to have some sort of location, maybe off campus, where you can do like a test site. When I first started here 28 years ago, we actually had a solar building over in the playing fields. And they took it down about 3 years later. But do you see the opportunity to kind of have a test building where you could, we have hybrid cars. Is there a way to get like fossil fuels, but then it regenerates into another source? There's so many things, obviously fusion, it's your storage capacity. But do you see something like that, having a location maybe off campus where you could do an
What a great
experimental
idea. I
building?
remember that building. I was here too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they had energy storage in the heat capacity in the walls. It
Yeah.
was by Tang Hall, I think, out
Yeah.
there, and it's gone. We were ahead of our time.
You were.
I think Ignacio wanted to say something.
Yeah, so in terms of there is that, and it's happening now with the solar farms in North Carolina. That is more than just a way to show the world that there are means that aren't necessarily on campus to reduce your emissions. That project is a test bed for us to hopefully implement new ideas to improve solar technology, improve solar intermittency, improve all of that kind of stuff. And that was, and that, at least from what I've heard, is the goal of the plan is for us to actually go out there and use it. And I think getting that knowledge, and especially now when we're planning to build solar on campus, that's also another resource that we can use to test out new technologies. I forget who was giving the presentation on the nuclear, on the cooling towers for the nuclear energy. That's another thing that we're doing on campus as a test bed. These are, we are wasting a lot of water, and water is the next issue that's coming down the line in terms of like energy. And we are using our campus it's a very tight campus, and every time we're packing more and more things into it, but I think we're doing the best, and maybe not the best, but there are opportunities. We just kind of have to seek them out. And I guess the integration between the staff and the students and the faculty, that's kind of what closes that loop and kind of allows those connections to be made. And I think fostering that environment is going to help keep making MIT a live testing facility, I think.
Question over here.
We have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's someone before you, over here.
I had a question about the energy consumption study compared to the other schools. Is there a reason why you chose to use just the number of students as the measure versus also employees? And the reason why I ask that is because MIT seems to have an exorbitant number of employees compared to other schools as far as the ratio to students.
Sure, that's a great question. And I think, so from what I've seen, the ratios are relatively similar. It's about 1-to-1, or maybe even a little bit higher at most of these three universities. And I essentially used the number of students because I think sort of a university at its core is about educating students, and it's about training people to go out into the world. And I think an important component of that is, if you do have a lot of auxiliary staff in addition to the students, that may be negatively affecting your sort of performance per student. And it's something maybe not to consider as a major source of reduction, but it's something to consider. If you're spending a lot of time with offices, heating and cooling for people besides the students, that could be considered an avenue in which emissions could be reduced. That being said, these numbers are very sort of first order, really trying to analyze sort of the consumption and emissions and that sort of stuff. There's a lot more numbers that you really have to look into. So I wouldn't really take this as sort of the end-all and be-all in terms of comparing MIT. I just chose to show these as just sort of a general idea. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. With the Boston-Cambridge area having perhaps the highest density of higher ed anywhere in the country, I was curious if any thoughts have come up about ways that MIT can work with, our neighbors effectively, and also our cities, which are clearly, staking out ground as being climate leaders. Any opportunities that you saw coming out of this class to perhaps widen the net a little bit?
Well, I think we're working on that. We had Susan Rasmussen from Cambridge come, and Ellison Brizius from Boston. So we're in contact with them. We're aware of their goals. We're dialing that into our plans. I think what's very clear, one thing that's very clear from where we are right now is it's absolutely required to cooperate and to work with the larger community. One thing that's very evident is the development of the New England grid, but there are more sort of people-to-people examples too that could come about.
And if I can add, I think MIT is pioneering that kind of working with the community through, and again, the Summit Farms was made it was a aggregated purchase agreement with Friends of the Post Office and the Boston Medical Group. If we take that and we apply it to working with Harvard, BU, BC, all of these schools to make another power purchase agreement, that's something that we're doing as a community. And that's, again, just getting the idea that we are trying to set an example for scalability and getting others to fall in line. And that's kind of, while we are a very energy dense and densely crowded area, it might not be the easiest thing to do things here together, but it might definitely be the move to go a little bit further and build some transmission lines and get an actual grid-connected utility-scale power plant going. And there's avenues, and I think that's what we're trying to show as MIT.
Joe, do you want to add to that? Because I know this has been something you've been really helping the whole class think about with the partnerships. Anything? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm sure we've missed it, but to put you on the spot.
So I think that a good example was the wind folks that came to talk about, this huge leased area out in the ocean. I mean, it's miles and miles and miles, but this whole idea of aggregation of several utility companies leasing out space to several other organizations to build, wind farms that would power all of New England. I mean, it's this idea of multiple people coming together kind of with a joint purpose. I think that was sort of the same idea that Ignacio talked a little bit about, is working together as communities to get more, fossil-free capability added to the grid. So I think that, for me, that was very powerful to see, how they carved up that part of the ocean and its leased properties. It's no different than Summit Farms, like who's going to take this piece or that piece or that piece. But we're building it, the utility companies. I mean, when I say we, as the customers and the communities are building our future, it's not just the utility companies as we did an era ago.
Kurt, one of the pieces that Tim and I have, we have to get through the end of the semester and some other things, but is to actually, on our radar, is to actually pull together all of the speakers with some of the students who are still on campus and actually ask those kind of questions. I mean, I would say part of what the course has enabled us to do is actually build, what one might call like a community of practice around how to solve this. I mean, everybody that came forth has also followed up to say, let us know how we can continue to think about this with you. So I envision that being a follow-up step after we recuperate.
Yeah, actually mine is a little bit more of a comment. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I feel really inspired actually hearing about this course that's been offered. And from each of your perspectives and each of your experiences as students and faculty. I wanted to kind of focus on something that Julian said when he said that he thinks it's really important that we begin the sort of MIT career of our students thinking about sustainability as part of our culture. And so I guess the question part of this comment is, how do we do that? How do we get people more at an early stage embedded in the conversation? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I think it's a community approach, right? And I think what I alluded to before, starting to organize is first and foremost the most important thing, and Julie's doing a great job of spearheading that. But in involving the students, the student groups, there's lots of energy groups on campus, sustainability groups. I know when I came to campus, I knew I wanted to be involved in like climate change as part of my research, and so I had a pretty laser focus. I knew what I was looking for. But as part of the GSC and talking to other students, a lot of students don't know that, especially at the undergrad level. And so part of the sustainability group, we are trying to come up with ways to kind of smack students in the face with it as they walk in the door. But if we can do that as a coordinated effort with the Institute through, I guess, I don't know how many of you know the One World Sustainability Party. That's a great opportunity to promote sustainability to campus at large. And it's those subtle things, like a lot of students are going to go there and drink and eat and whatever, but they're gonna, it's more of like a subtle thing that it's just starting to become part of everyday life. So when, if students, for example, have to, when they're putting purchase orders in, have to, go through a mandatory process of, assessing the carbon impact of what they're doing. That might, if that's like if that's commonplace amongst what they're, when they're ordering and they have to, if they have to think about that, maybe there's not a huge penalty for it, but as long as you're documenting it and accounting for it, that's just something that's subtle that people can do. But I think the big one is integrating students and faculty together, and these student groups with groups like ESI and the Office of Sustainability in coordinating their efforts so that we can all be working towards the same goals. I think that would go a long way, and you can leverage those student groups to engage the students at the ground level. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do that, and I think students are have some very creative ways to do that if there's support for it.
Thanks.
I haven't told Tim yet, but I have a new idea for a course.
Yeah, and I think these courses too are a great, are the best way, to be honest. Again, when I was coming here, there was no, for graduate students at least in mechanical engineering, there was no climate change track or anything like that. There was no major in it or anything. I know ESI is offering theirs for undergrads, but as that's starting to come up, I think that's one of the most important ones, is if you can get students involved with it as part of their degree. And they can be formally educated in it. I think that's incredibly effective. And then all the extracurriculars. That
makes a lot of sense. And so I'm super inspired by this, and I hope the course continues to live long, a long life. so that I can fantasize about maybe one day matriculating at MIT. Not as an engineer, I'm a lawyer by training, but something to learn.
That's a great comment. My last piece, and then we'll bring closure, is that we did not mention that this really, just in terms of going back to where we started today, that students, as a result of all the work that Derek and Shaban and team put into Energize MIT, that was all integrated into the course as well. So I just want to bring these pieces together from Imagine, Incubate, and Impact, that all of the if you're able to make it on the 14th, most of their analytics came out of working closely and accessing Energize MIT. So that's a good, that's where I'm trying to tie it back to your comment, is that as we move towards the data, access to the data pool, I think more and more courses can be developed where that data is available for students like these students to, have access to the data for further analytics and study. All right, Tim?
Yeah, I think, thank you for your question. I think we need to think about how maybe we could expand this. This has been, I've been teaching here more than 30 years. This has been a really fun experience, and I think it goes back to the question we had here, is the cooperation, and particularly the cooperation we got from people in facilities, and the students, the enthusiasm. This is something the students are passionate about. That was the best part. A bunch of adults sitting in a room, thoughtful and trying to solve an important problem. That's it. For me, that's it.
Well, I want to thank you guys. We still do have 2 weeks left of class, but you guys were tremendous. So thanks for joining us today. And Tim, thanks for putting up with me and my big ideas.
It was easy.
And thanks to all of you, for everyone in this room, and for particularly all those of you who are able to actually make this course a reality. So big round of applause, and then I'll bring Susie up.